Well, I hope you had a great weekend. I really do. It was a beautiful weekend across Kansas City. But I hope you didn't have a bloodbath of a weekend. Oh, gosh, you didn't see this? Maybe you did. The media is showing how weak its hand is in 2024. That's what came out of this weekend if you were burying yourself away and not following the news. And by the way, good for you. I try to do some of that myself. But just in case you are new to this or you just realized the media is full of two-bit hacks, well, today and this morning is your reminder of what a bunch of chumps and losers these people are. So Donald Trump gave a speech over the weekend. You know, you might have heard the guy's going to be the Republican nominee for president once again for a third straight time. So Trump is giving a speech over the weekend. And we all know this country's got itself a lot of issues right now. And he's at a rally in Ohio. You know, he's in that upper Midwest corridor where there's a lot of union workers, a lot of manufacturing that goes on in the car industry. And he's addressing folks in Ohio. And he makes a comment about the auto industry turning into a bloodbath if Joe Biden gets reelected. And he, Donald Trump, does not beat Joe Biden. So I'm going to play this entire clip for you. I'm going to go piece by piece on this. And you're going to sit there after listening to this minute-long clip and say, what's the big deal? And then we'll share with you how this thing got spun completely out of control by the media over the last 36 hours or so. Here's the full clip.
Mexico has taken over a period of 30 years, 34% of the automobile manufacturing business in our country. Think of it. Went to Mexico. China now is building a couple of massive plants where they're going to build the cars in Mexico and they think that they're going to sell those cars into the United States with no tax at the border. Let me tell you something to China. If you're listening, President Xi, and you and I are friends, but he understands the way I deal, those big monster car manufacturing plants that you're building in Mexico right now, and you think you're going to get that, you're going to not hire Americans, and you're going to sell the cars to us. Now, we're going to put a 100% tariff on every single car that comes across the line, and you're not going to be able to sell those cars. If I get elected, now, if I don't get elected, it's going to be a bloodbath for the whole, that's going to be the least of it. It's going to be a bloodbath for the country. That'll be the least of it. But they're not going to sell those cars. They're building massive factories of.
All right, Donald Trump over the weekend in Ohio. You just listened to that minute-long clip. What do you hear? You hear a guy talking about how Mexico has taken 34% of the car manufacturing away in this country. You hear about how China has set up car manufacturing locations in Mexico. And you hear Donald Trump say he's going to tariff the you-know-what out of those vehicles, and that if he does not win the election, there's going to be a bloodbath in the industry. That's what you heard, right? That's what everybody with an ounce of common sense heard in that minute-long clip. So if you were to Google right now, Trump bloodbath, here's what you get from NBC News, the top story right now when you Google Trump bloodbath. Quote, Trump says there will be a bloodbath if he loses the election. Let's see, the New York Times, Trump says migrants are not people and predicts a bloodbath if he loses. CNBC, Trump says there will be a bloodbath if he doesn't get elected in November as he campaigns in Ohio. This is the kind of stuff that they are going into overdrive on, and it's only mid-March. It's only mid-March. Now, here's the good news. The good news is the media is even, and I say this, the mainstream media, the traditional corporate media, is more out of touch and is even less important than it was 8 years ago. People have now realized, and they've opened up their eyes to what the media landscape is in this country and what it's become and how biased. It always was, but it really went into overdrive the last 8 years, and people have awakened. They have alternative media sources. And by the way, that's not always a good thing, I will admit. There's plenty of lies out there across the political spectrum that if you want to find them, you can find them. But in this case, being able to go on a social media platform and see the actual context of what the president said. And not just taking a little portion of that clip where Donald Trump says there's going to be a bloodbath in this country, and then reading these absurd headlines from across your, national media landscape is a great thing to have. And it signals to me that they are already so desperate that they're breaking this stuff out. They're breaking out oh my goodness, Donald Trump calls for a bloodbath. Everybody watch out. They are already in that mode in mid-March. It shows how desperate they are, because anybody with a brain could clearly see what Donald Trump was referring to when he talks about a collapse of an industry. And if you even watch half of that clip, you're going to come to the very same conclusion. It's not all that difficult. But if you're somebody who just can't help yourself, you literally cannot tell the truth to yourself. If you listen to that clip and you say, oh my goodness, that's offensive, he's calling for a bloodbath, you are lying to yourself. Forget your friends and your family and whoever you talked to at the water cooler this morning. You are lying to yourself. If you listen to that clip and you think that is incendiary rhetoric, it's not. It's conversational. It's an expression. It's how people talk. And you don't have to take my word for it, by the way. People use the word bloodbath all the time. Here's the media.
But as Politico.com reports tonight on the, quote, bloodbath at the RNC,
Headlines calling it a, quote, bloodbath.
Be a bloodbath. Not only is it going to be a bloodbath, but after they leave New Hampshire, it's a bloodbath on her home turf. That's really tough.
Trump has left a lot of corpses in his wake. I mean, we can count the bodies as part of the, quote, MAGA drive to take over Maricopa County. And the headline refers to it as an impending bloodbath.
columnist Charles Blow has a new piece for the New York Times entitled A Biden Bloodbath.
2018 midterms, you can bet that they 100% are fearing a slaughter. In fact, the word bloodbath and massacre come up frequently.
The Republican Party will be destroyed. It's going to be a bloodbath.
There's going to be a bloodbath one way or the other.
Bloodbath for Bernie Sanders.
It's been a bloodbath there, shaping up to be a bloodbath.
Head off a bloodbath in next year's crucial midterm.
Off-year elections are often a bloodbath.
This week's bloodbath for Democrats.
A bloodbath at the ballot box.
Are we good?
Hashtag bloodbath and beyond.
I mean, that's a media just mashup that you heard right there of them in recent years using the term bloodbath with their own words.
Well,
CNN,
words mean something except when they don't.
Except when they don't.
Right.
Except when we want them to mean something else.
Yeah.
Because, well, orange man bad. Listen, there's a lot of reasons where you can go and say, I don't know if Donald Trump's the guy in 24. A lot of cases you can make. Heck, I've made them over the years on how he can be better. But for crying out loud, you want to jump on that narrative over the weekend? You're a liar if you do, and you're a complete and utter embarrassment to yourself. Coming up on KCMO, it is great to be back on a Monday morning. Yesterday, to me, is always one of the great days of the year. It is the unofficial start of spring. With Selection Sunday here. Mark's already, Mark looks like he hasn't slept in the last 12 hours because he's too busy placing 7-team parlays with Selection Sunday over. Are you?
Well, that is true. My new baby had a little bit of a cold, so that's more why I'm looking sleepy this morning.
Yeah. That's what they all say, you degenerate gambler. Come on.
I did do some of that, though.
I know you did. I'll give you 3 winners and 3 losers as we roll through the morning. At 6:35, by the way, a pastor has put his face and his voice to the yes side of the Chiefs and the Royals. What do we make of that? All coming up on KCMO Talk Radio, 95.7 FM. And stream us if you're back from spring break on the KCMO Talk Radio app. Well, the Chiefs and the Royals, they're going to need every single pastor and community leader that they can get their hands on to try to endorse this vote yes coming up on April 2nd. We are 2 weeks from tomorrow away from voting day in Jackson County, where you will determine whether or not the Royals and the Chiefs will get another 0.3 cents of your sales tax dollars for up to the next 40 years. And I'll tell you, I mean, everywhere I go, this is the thing that people want to talk about. Whether it was at the Big 12 tournament on Friday night, I bumped into multiple people, and this is the issue that is on their minds. Will this pass? Do the people want it to pass? And this is very anecdotal when I say this. I have not met, just like on the streets, a rah-rah yes voter. I've met like casual yes voters, but I'm saying the most passionate people that I've met have been no's. And when you're talking about low voter turnout elections in April, where people can choose or cannot choose to go to the polls depending on what kind of mood they're in that day and how their day goes, that's a dangerous spot for these two teams to be in. And I think deep down, they know that. They thought that a low voter turnout April election would be good for them. But frankly, over the last few weeks, suddenly, I don't think they want that anymore. I think they realize this is going to be much more difficult to pass than they thought it was going to be a couple of months ago. And that's why you've seen them dump another $1 million into advertising on the vote yes side to get the Chiefs the upgrades at Arrowhead and also to get, of course, the Royals their downtown ballpark. So this new ad dropped over the weekend, and it's from Pastor Ron Lindsay of Fortress Hope Church on why he's voting yes on question 1 on April 2nd. Here we go. Let's roll it.
The Chiefs and Royals are a central part of the personality and the character of our city. To keep the Chiefs and Royals in Jackson County, I'm voting yes. Question 1. We're talking about better than $1 billion of private investment from the Chiefs and the Royals for more jobs and small business growth benefiting every community with no new taxes. Vote yes on question 1.
All right, there is Pastor Ron Lindsay. He is with Concord Fortress of Hope Church, and he is telling the voters in Jackson County that, yes, the Royals and the Chiefs are indeed worth his Red Lobster money.
I'm not worth your Red Lobster money?
They are worth the Red Lobster money. That is the message from Pastor Ron Lindsay of Concord Fortress of Hope Church, John.
I like the verbiage in there with no new taxes. This is a little different than saying it's not a new tax. You're saying no new taxes.
Interesting observation.
I think that's a subtle switch, possibly.
No new taxes.
With no new taxes, basically, as the yes side implies, it is the same rate.
Yes.
But you get into the semantic argument with this is not a new tax. It's it is not an extension. It's the sunsetting of the 31 agreement and the addition of the new one at the same rate.
It is a new tax. Mm-hmm. However, now they're splitting hairs by saying there are no new taxes, or you know what they should really say? No additional taxes.
Sure.
That's the word they should use.
There you go.
I mean, how did we just figure this out at 6:38 in the morning on a Monday on KCMO 95.7? And they've got these.
Well, that's next week's.
Well,
Pete, you're ahead of them.
I'm ahead of them. Yeah, you know what? Then I'm going to go do what they do and be a political consultant for Axiom.
Sure.
Because
you're giving this stuff away free right now.
I am giving this stuff away free. And some people are making, hundreds of thousands of dollars as consultants to guide them in these horrible directions. I mean, whether or not this thing passes on April 2nd, the people behind the Yes campaign should be embarrassed. Those who messaged behind the Yes campaign should never work in political consulting again. They have done a horrible job and a tremendous disservice to their own side. Whether it's the, claiming this is not a new tax when it is a new tax, even if you're a fan of it, it is a new tax by the very definition, because you're repealing the old tax, you're adding in this new tax, and you're extending it, for another 40 years. It's the analogy I've used for the better part of the last 2 weeks now. If you and I agreed to a loan deal where I was giving you $100 a month, and then you said, hey, I want $100 a month for another 5 years. And I said, well, we agreed to 2 years. I'm not giving you 5 years. And you're like, well, it's still $100 a month. It doesn't matter. You're asking me for more money over a longer period of time. It is by definition a new tax. But amazingly, you've had both of these teams and their leaderships go out there and insist, no, trust us. It's not a new tax. Nope, you're going to be just fine. So now, John's right to point out in this most recent ad by Pastor Ron Lindsay that if you haven't seen it, will be up on your TV starting this week. They're using the phrase no new taxes, but even that is dishonest. They should maybe say no additional taxes, but it is still technically a new one. Now, meantime, Kansas City Tenants is sending out flyers. And you know I can't stand Kansas City Tenants. They're a bunch of commies trying to take over town. I mean, they might project a softer version of that, but that's what they are at their core.
Commies with a marketing budget.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's amazing. They love capitalism when it comes to marketing. So they are sending out flyers. And it's a flyer that says on the top, and I saw this on Tony's Kansas City, Billionaire Ballpark, vote no, April 2nd. It says here, John Sherman, billionaire owner of the Royals, wants to build a new stadium downtown, and he wants your tax money to do it. And it's got a picture of John Sherman and Clark Hunt, like their kind of faces cut out in the flyer. And then it says the proposed stadium would cost taxpayers $2 billion over 40 years, displace 20-plus local businesses, increase property taxes, and raise rents. And then it says cost our public schools $500,000 every year. And then it says vote no April 2nd. While the billionaires get the handouts, taxpayers get stuck with the bill. Jackson County voters will have a chance to say no to the 3/8 sales tax on April 2nd. So that's the messaging from KC Tenants. Now, here's the amazing part. I know KC Tenants is a bunch of, like I said, communist hacks and wannabes, but they do make some reasonable points in that flyer. You are undoubtedly talking about increased rents in the area of where the Royals are going to be, down in the Crossroads. I mean, if you think that landlords down there are not going to jack up rents once you find out that the Royals are going to be in your backyard, you're kidding yourself. We were talking about this up in North Kansas City. Remember, Mark had a buddy, or has a buddy, who owns, what does he own up there, Mark, in North KC, right where the stadium was potentially going to be behind Chapels?
An ice cream shop.
That's right. And they wanted to jack up his rent, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then in the springtime, the landlord agreed to basically the same rent price that he was at.
Yeah, they were able to stay.
So it's amazing how that works.
Yep.
The ice cream shop thought it was going to get booted because rents were going to go up, because the Royals were going to go up north. And then when that deal started to fall through, suddenly the landlord went back to Mark's buddy who owns an ice cream shop up there in North Kansas City and was like, actually, I'm not going to raise the rent on you. This price is pretty good.
Suddenly they can renegotiate.
Yes. Why do you think that is? Because they realized the ballpark was not going up to Clay County. So it's indisputable that there will be an increase in rents in and around the Crossroads District if the Royals end up going down there. That's true. There is a cost to taxpayers on 3/8 sales tax. There are local businesses that will be displaced. So, you know what? When it comes to that flyer, while I don't like the messenger, the message, even if you're a yes vote, the message does have accuracy to it. And that's going to be tough to overcome because when people like myself are admitting that groups like KC Tenants are making sense,
talk about a bombshell,
then suddenly there is this grassroots groundswell that the teams have to overcome. 913-408-7957. That's our studio line, and that is our text line on a Monday morning on KCMO. Over the weekend, by the way, it was a great weekend here in town. The Current played their first game. But I'm here to share a message with people who were trying a little too hard on social media when it came to showing off how they got to the game and how easy it was. You're trying too hard. It's like the guy trying to impress the girl a little too much. You're overdoing it. I'll explain what they were doing. Even though I'm fired up for this women's soccer team being here, or I should say the stadium being here and the stadium being open. We'll get to it coming up on KCMO Talk Radio, 95.7 FM. Something tells me Dan Bongino is going to have plenty to say today about Donald Trump and the bloodbath lines that are going viral. We'll get to more of that after 7 o'clock here on KCMO. But over the weekend, of course, the Current Kansas City Current women's professional soccer team. They opened up their brand new stadium on the riverfront. And, I was happy for them. Listen, it was a great weekend in this town. Big 12 tournament was very successful. Auto Show had its deal at Bartle Hall. Current opened up their new stadium. Games on ABC. ESPN's carrying it. Patrick Mahomes is in the spotlight. St. Patrick's Day parade seemed to go well yesterday. So all in all, a very good weekend for Kansas City. And we talk a lot about the issues and the bad, but when there's good, I'm happy and wanting to highlight it. So I say all that to bring up this Current game because one of the big issues going into the season, and that came up a couple of weeks ago, is the fact that parking was going to run you $68 after taxes and fees to park at the KC Current game. That is absolute insanity. That's more money than you pay to go to a Chiefs game. That's more than double what you pay to go to a Royals game. That's nuts. Now, the reason for that is because there's, frankly, not enough parking up at the Current game. So basically, they're trying to squeeze you and say, hey, if you really want to drive, it's going to cost you. So this was a big topic, and we talked about it the last couple of weeks on the show. So come Saturday was a really beautiful day, and I saw a lot of, people in town tweeting and sharing out how they got to the game. City leaders, city managers talking about how they were biking, or they took, a shuttle bus, or they walked. Brian Platt, who is the city manager, I saw him with this on Twitter on Saturday. X, excuse me. He writes here, just rode my bike to opening day at the first stadium purpose built for a women's sports team in the world. Free bike parking right at the gate. Oh, that's cute. I'm sure Eric Bunch, Bike Boy Bunch on the city council was very proud of you. But, for those of us who have families who don't live in Kansas City, who you need to support this team to make money, this team cannot be profitable with only the hipsters showing up on their bikes every weekend. You need families to show up as well. And I'm sorry, I'm not throwing my 3 girls on my back and rolling out K10 and then the I-35 northbound to get downtown to the ballpark. How about you, Mark? Does that sound good? We can go side by side. You can throw your 3 girls on your back, and I'll throw mine. And then Mark can be, our John can be our leader in front of us going up 35 northbound in our bikes.
Yeah, that's impossible.
Yeah.
I don't live at 3 like Platt or wherever he lives. I don't know. But yeah, that's only like a mile from the stadium. Yeah, I could bike there if I live a mile by myself.
And you're by yourself.
Yeah.
But you need kids to get into this stadium. And you need kids who don't live within walking distance or biking distance to the stadium. So I'm glad the first weekend and the first game was a home run. I'm very happy. I want to get the owner, Chris Long, on the show this week. I'm happy for him. I'm happy for the town. But they do need to figure out the transportation situation and the amount of people who are trying to make a point of how easy it was to bike and walk and shuttle. You're trying too hard. Just stop. You're trying too hard, John. You know who they are.
You want to go in with me on a parking barge?
Yeah.
You may be a little more familiar on the East Coast. Maybe we should get a ferry from
Yeah.
And, just maybe have you can board at Parkville and we'll just cruise around the bend. Right?
Yeah.
Ferries are like 2 stories, aren't they?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, man, you're bringing me back.
Yeah.
On the nice days when I was working for Fox in New York, I would take a ferry back across the Hudson River some days.
Yeah.
But it was expensive. It was like $7.50 one way. So it wasn't cheap.
Now what's the price now, right?
Good point.
Let's get a used ferry and go into business here.
Now we're talking. We'll drop you off right in front there. We'll sell booze on the ferry.
Drop you off at the pier.
Yes. Now, do any of us actually have a boating license? Because I don't. So someone's got to drive the boat.
I bet Ray
we'll
does.
Get Ray.
Yeah.
Ray's nominated for that gig.
All right. Ray Stevens, our midday guy at 10 o'clock, is going to be our designated boat driver.
Kurt Russell starring Captain Ron. This will be Captain Ray. Pretty much a similar outcome.
Each way, you get a new Ray story, all right?
Oh, sure.
Because he's got enough stories. I mean, you could go for days without hearing the same story on repeat. So he's going to have a fresh story each way on the boat. That's the bonus when you take the ferry from Parkville to the riverfront and get dropped off for the game. We got a new business model here in KCMO.
Sure.
I'm leaving this radio thing. I'm going to be running the ferry from Parkville down to the women's soccer games. We got a plan now. I like it. We say all this tongue in cheek, but I really do want to see this thing succeed. It was fun to see the Longs. It was fun to see the Mahomes getting interviewed before the game. I do. I want to see it work out. And I know some of you are like, they're woke. Okay, fine. Yeah, they are. They have their pronouns on their team page. It's goofy. And by the way, here's a shocker for you. All the pronouns for the players are she, her. Whoa!
Yep. Talk about a bombshell.
Can't believe it, right? So, yeah, they do some goofy woke stuff like that. But, I want to see any private business do well. And by the way, the Current, for those of you like knocking the Current, they're looking for less taxpayer dollars, and they took far less taxpayer dollars, almost none. And you compare that to what the Royals and the Chiefs want, and it's night and day. So I want to add that as well to the conversation.
Well, to your point, for them to succeed, they do need to address the issue and not just pretend like this is going to go away with bikes and streetcars.
Yes, absolutely. They do need to figure out a way for a family like mine and Mark's to take our girls down to a game without paying $68 to park. That is insane. And if you want to say that's admonishing women's soccer, fine. Maybe it is. But guess what? When I pay $50 to park in a Chiefs game, I'm also kind of like, man, that stings.
No, I don't think it's admonishing anything. The stadium holds 11,500 roughly, so you just need to have adequate parking for that many spaces.
Yeah.
Right?
That's
simple.
Yeah, that's it. That's what you got to do. And for them to succeed, they need the families to show up. It can't be all woke, childless hipsters. It just can't. Coming up on KCMO Talk Radio. The media, they started their campaign against Donnie over the weekend because of how he used the word bloodbath, and how the Biden administration responded was a complete and utter embarrassment. We'll get to it next. Did you see that bloodbath for the bubble teams on Selection Sunday yesterday? Can we say that word, or is that not a word that we're allowed to use anymore? It's amazing how the media picks and chooses what words are suddenly allowed to be used based on what Donald Trump says at any given point in time. Good morning. Happy Monday. We're back on KCMO, and we're glad you're back. Maybe you missed us last week with spring break. Hopefully you had a good time, but welcome back. 25 degrees this morning across town, so make sure you're putting on that jacket as you head out the door this morning. So this is so stupid on so many levels, but it's also so predictable. And it shows how pathetic, absolutely pathetic, the media has become. Heck, I'm flipping around this morning right now, CBS this morning, not our local partners at KCTV5. I was watching them, but they go to the national stuff at 7 o'clock. And here's their headline this morning, the lower third, Trump's controversial comments. Donald Trump did not say anything controversial when it came to bloodbaths over the weekend. Donald Trump was talking about the auto industry going to hell in a handbasket if he does not win. That's his opinion. You don't have to agree with it, but that's his opinion. And his opinion was that, and is, that if he is not elected, there will be issues when it comes to the auto industry. Take a listen to what he had to say. And then the media spent 36 hours over the weekend screaming, hemming, and hawing and acting outraged by it.
Mexico has taken, over a period of 30 years, 34% of the automobile manufacturing business in our country. Think of it. Went to Mexico. China now is building a couple of massive plants where they're going to build the cars in Mexico and they think that they're going to sell those cars into the United States with no tax at the border. Let me tell you something to China. If you're listening, President Xi, and you and I are friends, but he understands the way I deal, those big monster car manufacturing plants that you're building in Mexico right now, and you think you're going to get that, you're going to not hire Americans, and you're going to sell the cars to us. Now, we're going to put a 100% tariff on every single car that comes across the line, and you're not going to be able to sell those cars. If I get elected, now, if I don't get elected, it's going to be a bloodbath for the whole, that's going to be the least of it. It's going to be a bloodbath for the country. That'll be the least of it. But they're not going to sell those cars. They're building massive factories of.
All right. So listen to that. If you've got half a brain, you understand the context, right? You hear Donald Trump talk about how, a lot of the audio manufacturing jobs have gone to Mexico. He's right about that. China wants to set up shop. China wants to set up shop in Mexico for its car manufacturing. He threatens them with tariffs. I mean, the same thing that we dealt with for 4 years. And then he says it'll be a bloodbath if he doesn't win effectively. Okay, not a big deal. Clearly in context of the car industry. I mean, please, you don't have to like Trump. Like, I don't really care. I don't care. Heck, certainly I've been critical of him plenty over the last bunch of years, but it doesn't really matter. This is irrelevant to any of that. Be upset with Trump, but over this, you're just showing that you're being disingenuous. And you're showing that you've got major TDS, Trump derangement syndrome, if this is the thing where you're up in arms and, oh, my goodness, how could he say such a thing, John?
Well, fortunately, he said that. Otherwise, they would have had to double down on him saying that he and she were friends.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. That would have been the story had he not said bloodbath.
Well, you're right. And I am I'm starting to see a turn of the media away from this narrative to now his claim that some migrants aren't people. And I'm sure that's in context of, those who are committing crimes and allegedly, killing young girls on running tracks at the University of Georgia. Like, yes, those are subhuman individuals. That is true. That is a fact. But they are conveniently moving away from the bloodbath because even they're getting caught with their pants down. Now, of course, Pops had to put out a statement on this yesterday. Here's the Biden-Harris bloodbath statement that got put out. Tonight, Donald Trump said there would be a bloodbath if he wasn't elected, and that if he lost, there would be no more elections. After opening the general election by meeting with authoritarian leaders and rallying alongside conspiracy theorists, Donald Trump continues to praise dictators, promise to pardon political violence, and launch racist attacks against black and brown Americans. It's why last night, Trump's own former VP Mike Pence, who Trump supporters called to hang for not overturning the election, came out against Trump. This is who Donald Trump is, a loser who gets beat by over 7 million votes and then instead of appealing to a wider mainstream audience, doubles down on his threats of political violence. He wants another January 6th, but the American people are going to give him another electoral defeat this November because they continue to reject his extremism, his affection for violence, and his thirst for revenge. That is from Joe Biden and Kamala Harris over the weekend.
No, it's not. It's from their staff.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point.
Come on, man.
Fair, you got me there, John. I can't come back on that.
Not shooting the messenger, just that message. So.
You're right. You're right. Yeah, Joe doesn't even know the message was sent out. Spot on. This is a sign of desperation. That's exactly what this is. It's a sign of desperation. When you are already opening up this can of worms, when you're running for a re-election and you can't literally talk about anything you've done, this is what you have to turn to. These are the kind of fear-mongering tactics that you have to bring back or try to bring back to the forefront. Now, would Trump be better off in his campaign rallies talking about literally two things, the economy and immigration? Yes, he would be. I mean, frankly, I think Trump should cut his speech down to 5 minutes. I know that's not what the people want when they wait in line for 10 hours. I mean, it's like going to a Springsteen concert. You're showing up for the 3 to 4 hour show. You're not showing up for an hour and a half greatest hits. That being said, if we're talking about winning elections and not just firing up crowds, 5-10 minute speeches, call it a day and move on. Two things: economy, jobs, immigration, sayonara, see you later, I'm out. MAGA, vote Trump, whatever, right? That's all he should really be doing. Because if not, it is going to be a long 7-8 months, and they're going to try to pick every single word out of every single speech that they can to try to help Joe get across the finish line. And Nancy Pelosi was doing that as well on the Sunday shows yesterday.
Because he's even predicting a bloodbath. What does that mean? He's going to exact a bloodbath? There's something wrong here. How respectful I am of the American people and their goodness. But how much more do they have to see from him to understand that this isn't what our country is about?
Oh, my gosh.
Wonder how long it's been since she's been to San Francisco, been back home.
Yeah, seriously. Go on the streets there. Tell me how that's going. I mean, her husband was whacked around by some random guy in his underwear. Let's not forget that, right?
Yep.
I mean, are you kidding me? You want to talk about violence? Look at your own city, lady. Your husband can't stay safe. The guy's worth $100 million. He's getting slapped around in his undies. I mean, what are we talking about here? Are you kidding me? When you look at Donald Trump and you look at 2024, the good news is this. The media is less impactful. The more traditional mainstream media is less impactful than it was 8 years ago. It is easier to see like clips like we played this morning in full context. You don't have to wait for radio or maybe somebody on Fox to play something in full context. You can now pull it up yourself on social media. And the media doesn't like that, by the way. But this, even by their low standards, this was a stretch. And it signals to me clear desperation ahead of November. And it's only March 18th. It's still technically winter. And they're already doing this song and dance. Coming up on KCMO, Steve Moore, Freedom Works economist. He worked with Donnie during his 4 years in office. He'll be here bottom of the hour on KCMO on the state of the economy. But next, Frank White, the Jackson County chairman, the executive, is crying racism when it comes to one of his own on the Jackson County legislature. This is rich. And we'll share it next on 95.7 FM on the KCMO Talk Radio app. Let's just call a spade a spade. They're all a bunch of morons. How about that? All right. Does that sound good for you at 7:22 in the morning? So apparently calling a spade is racism, according to Frank White. Yeah, the Jackson County executive was upset over the weekend that a legislator, Manny Abarca, who I'm no fan of, by the way, used the phrase, let's call a spade in reference to Frank White. Of course, in case you didn't know, Frank White is black. Now, I'll get to what Frank White said in his statement here, but at no point would I think about that phrase in reference to a black person and think that it's racist. Would you? I wouldn't.
As I thought about it and saw this, I thought, you have to be my age, I think. This is like Norman Lear, Mel Brooks kind of stuff. Blazing Saddles, right? Archie Bunker would have said that.
Yeah.
Right? So you go way back then, and since then, I know what the phrase means, but it seems to be avoided typically, I suppose.
Well, I mean, I've never thought of the phrase as anything more than what it is. Let's call a spade a spade. Let's say it how it is. I mean, that's what it means to me.
We're objecting to the word being used there that's repeated twice.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And again, that harkens way, way back. So,
well,
now to that point, I would say the woke like to scream, educate yourself. So shouldn't you understand, even though that's a term that's antique now, that it was used as a derogatory?
I didn't know that it was, to be honest. And Manny and I are like the same age.
That's what I thought.
Yeah. I mean,
I thought he doesn't know any better. I'm not a fan either, but I'm like, I don't know that Manny. But to the same time, when you get screamed at by a woke person, educate yourself.
Yeah. Well,
I would say that.
I have no sympathy for Manny Abarca here. Let's be very clear. The guy screamed racism at every turn. And now it's come back to bite him in the rear end. So I'm not sitting here with an ounce of sympathy for this Jackson County legislator who Frank White is now claiming was using a racist slur when he said about him, let's call a spade a spade. The backstory here is that Manny Abarca wants Frank White's job. He wants to be the Jackson County executive. Manny has been very pro-Royals and pro-Chiefs, getting their 3/8 cent sales tax and getting them on the ballot. Frank White has been very kind of, let's pump the brakes here. Frank White, of course, last week requested $1 million from both of these teams to pay for the county to put on this election. Manny didn't like that. So Manny went on his social media pages and responded to somebody's tweets about this. And he said about Frank White, he has waited since his last team contract expiration to seek his revenge, implying this is all about Frank White's revenge against the Royals because, you know, he's still got some beef with the franchise. And then he says here in the statement, let's call a spade, referring to Frank White. Basically, let's call it like it is. So Frank White puts out a letter, and he made his reaction public on Friday with the subject line, urgent call for leadership, condemning racist rhetoric and campaign misconduct. And he says here in this letter, it is in this light that I must call upon you with the utmost urgency to take immediate and unequivocal action, Frank White wrote in his letter. I urge you to personally issue public statements condemning legislator Abarca's racist attack against me. You know, there's no one right now who is involved in the Royals-Chiefs saga that is looking good. There is no one on the yes side who is really looking all that good. I mean, the teams think you're stupid. They're like, it's no new tax. I mean, even if you're a fan of the yes vote, it is technically by every definition a new tax. Don't lie to me. It's a new tax. And that's fine. You're allowed to want a new tax, but don't lie and say it's not. It's a new tax. If a tax was going to end and you wanted to extend, it's a new tax. But then the no side people, Frank White, Casey Tenants, like they look like horses' asses too, so many of them. So I'm like, nobody's looking good right now. Nobody's looking like the adult in the room right now. This thing has become such a mess. There's so much finger pointing. There's so much petty politics going on. It's really a shame. And who do I blame for that? I blame two groups in large part. I blame the leadership with the teams, but then also the legislature. The legislature has mishandled this thing out of the gates. And that's partly because Frank White can't figure out his way out of a paper bag. And that's been the case since he was elected executive in this county. He screwed up most things at every turn. And the team just trying to kind of bully their way through and now suddenly realizing down the stretch, gosh, this thing might not be the slam dunk that we thought it was. So no, we got 2 weeks to go. 2 weeks from tomorrow is Election Day, April 2nd. You're going to go to the polls in Jackson County and decide whether or not to continue a 3/8 cent sales tax or to vote no on this thing. And if nothing else, maybe we'll get a reprieve when all is said and done from the numbskulls in charge in Jackson County. And they can keep up their pillow fights behind closed doors because it is tough to pick winners and losers right now because as far as I'm concerned, they're all losers. Next, Steve Moore is not a loser. He's a great guy. He's one of the best economists in the country. He's on Fox News regularly, and he will be here next on 95.7 FM KCMO.